This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and this one's all about a polyamorous woman who's writing in because she has concerns that her polyamorous husband might be pulling away from the lifestyle and consequently could be pulling away from her and their marriage. And she goes out to the community to ask for help. She's saying, hey, is this something I should be worried about, some of his behaviors lately, or is this just the phase he's going through? And what you're going to find out at the end of this story is this is another example of a polyamory failure. So let's get into this story and see what it's all about. She starts off and says, my situation is somewhat complicated, so I'll start by giving some background. I've been happily married to my husband, Stephen, for over 3 years. He's 31 and I am 28. We are both poly and have been since before we met. My journey, as she calls it, started my freshman year of college, although I had never been fully monogamous with anyone prior to that. That's a surprise. Stephen's journey began after he got his degree and moved to the city where we live. Not knowing anyone, he used dating apps to meet people. There he met and started dating an older woman who was poly. At the time, he didn't even know what it meant, laugh out loud, she says. But he soon found out he fit the lifestyle and has been living that way ever since. He and I met at a baby shower our mutual friends were having to celebrate the arrival of their firstborn. So this was some kind of baby shower where the men go with the women. The funny thing is, we were both there with other people who happen to be poly too. So they only hang out with poly people. So they're really into this lifestyle. The four of us got to talking and hanging out. We started going out on dates together and became really good friends. Now I wonder, since they were poly, were they switching off with each other? I mean, I don't know what goes on in these situations. After a year of Stephen and I dating, we realized there was something more between us and officially became primary partners while still dating other people. So this primary partner thing is, I guess, your mainstay, and then you have relationships with other people beyond that. A few months after that, we moved in together. Our bond continued to grow and we got married and have been happily enjoying life ever since. During the first 2 years of our marriage, we both had at least one partner. After that, the partners we had fell away, and Stephen and I had been living monogamously for over a year until we decided to restart our journey. He and I both found suitable partners. I was lucky to match with a guy I met through my job, and Stephen matched with a woman he met online. Now, how does that come up in the workplace? I mean, you're talking to one of your coworkers and then you just kind of drop a hint that, hey, I'm in an open marriage or I'm polyamorous. I mean, how does that even come up in a business setting? I don't know. She says it was perfect as our partners are married and openly poly, which is one of the rules we set since being married. Stephen's relationship with his partner lasted for about 4 months. It ended when she and her husband moved away for his job. I'm still with my partner and things are going very well there, and as I stated before, Stephen and I are still very happy together. So now her husband doesn't have a partner, but she's still hooking up with this guy she met through her job. Now, here's where my concern comes in. The other rule we set is if one of us is without a partner, then the other would temporarily stop dating until the other spouse found someone new to date. When Stephen's partner left, I assumed that's what we would do, but Stephen insisted I continue seeing my partner as he had no problem with it. I reluctantly did, and he assured me it was no issue and he was fine with it. Sounds great, right? It would be, except Stephen doesn't have any drive to find a new partner. He's been throwing himself into his work and is becoming a workaholic. We've heard that before in stories, haven't we? He's studying and learning a new skill so he can get promoted, and he's been spending most of his free time doing that now. Well, good for Stephen. That's smart. This isn't much of a worry for me on its own, but what worries me is that our physical contact has declined over the past 2 months. Now that definitely is a red flag. We've gone from around 5 times a week down to 1, and there were a couple weeks in there where we had no physical contact at all. This is totally unlike him, as he has a very high X drive like I do. Well, if that's the case, then that's definitely something you need to be concerned about. I know his focus on getting this promotion is taking up most of his time, but I'm concerned he may be losing interest in our marriage and the special relationship we have. I'd like to hear thoughts from other poly couples about this situation. Am I making too much of this, or do I have cause to worry? And that's the end of her original post. And now we're going to take a look at some of the responses she got back. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, be sure to hit that like button right now. That will help out the channel tremendously and also help to get this video seen throughout the world. Now let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one is from a woman. She says, marriage itself has many ebbs and flows, and being poly really complicates things. That's an understatement. My husband and I have been married for 28 years, and we were poly for the first 7 until our kids were born. After they graduated, we got back into it, and it's been great, and we enjoy our partners. The key is having firm ground rules, which it sounds like you have. I think your husband is just preoccupied with his job now and will get back to his old self once things settle down. Good luck, and feel free to reach out if you need a sounding board. So it sounds like from this woman, she and her husband have been doing this for years, and apparently their marriage is working. I'm skeptical. The next response is from a guy. He says, I'm sensing your husband could have a level of animus towards your current partner, even though he's not acting like it. My wife and I are both poly, and something like this happened early on with us. It was during one of the times I was without a partner. That's not surprising, because I can guarantee in these relationships, the woman is getting much more action than the man is. He says, without realizing it, I was harboring resentment towards my wife's partner. This came out during one of my individual counseling sessions. We addressed the situation and worked through it. We got back on track and continue living a healthy poly lifestyle to this day, some 5 years later. You call that healthy? Okay. The next response is from a guy. He says, my wife and I are in the service and have been poly since we first started dating. She was already poly when we met. I had always dated around, so the concept was right up my alley. It works great for us, as we're often apart for long periods of time. Before we engage with someone new, we get each other's approval. Like I said, it works great at this stage of our lives, but once things settle down, we plan to go mono and start a family. As for your husband, it sounds like nothing more than job stress. I wouldn't sweat it too much. And the final response is from a woman, and she's got a little different take here on things. She says, why did you and your husband get married? If you can't satisfy each other in the bedroom and need to continuously go outside the marriage for satisfaction, then just stay single. When you and your husband are sleeping with these other people, are you using protection? Are you getting tested for diseases? It sounds to me like your husband has wised up and is second-guessing the lifestyle. If I were you, I'd end your current extramarital affair and have a heart-to-heart talk with your husband before it's too late. Now, the OP didn't like this. She responded. She said, first of all, I'm not having an extramarital affair. This is something that my husband and I have always done and agreed to. Second, my husband and I are very satisfied with each other, both physically and mentally. If you're not poly, you wouldn't understand it. I love and like my husband, and he feels the same about me. Whereas with our partners, our connection is only on a like level and nothing more. That's interesting. So she's saying, hey, with my husband, I like him. I guess she's saying I like him physically, but I also have this deep love for him. Whereas with my partner, I only like him physically. Does anybody believe that? I don't. She says, in terms of protections, condoms are required unless we mutually agree to go without beforehand. As for testing, we generally do it at least twice a year. So they have some of these hookups without protection? Oh, man. And now the OP comes back with a couple of updates. Now, the first one happens just a few days later, but then the second one doesn't happen, as you're going to see, for many, many months later. And, well, I'm not going to get into it until we cover it. Here's the first update 9 days later. She says, thanks to everyone who has responded to me. I feel so much better after receiving support from the community. It's hard for those who are not poly to understand our lifestyle, but I respect and appreciate their input on my situation as well. Per the suggestion many of you gave, I had a heart-to-heart discussion with my husband. He admitted that he's been stressed out about work and didn't realize we were not as close as before until I pointed it out to him. He apologized and has more than made it up to me since. Everything is good now, and we are committed to our marriage and our lifestyle. Again, I want to thank everyone for your input, and I wish you continued love and happiness in your relationships. And that's the end of her first update. Now, like I said, she doesn't come back for months. And in fact, the final update she gave came 22 months later, so almost 2 years after she first posted. She says, I wanted to come back and update everyone who followed my post back in 2021, so this all happened back then. I've gotten a number of questions about my marriage in the group chat, so I thought it best if I just made a post about it. My husband and I are no longer together. Boom! I'm sure everybody saw that coming. There's not a lot to say other than our lives grew apart and we started going in opposite directions. He ended up getting the promotion he worked so hard for, and I am so proud of him. After he did, I thought he'd settle back into being his old self, but he didn't. Though we still got along really well, I could tell he was falling out of love with me. He never got back into poly and eventually came to me one day and told me he wanted a divorce. So out of the blue, he just does this? She says, I was crushed as it was totally unexpected. Even though I sensed we were drifting apart, I thought he was happy. I offered him anything I could to change his mind, but he'd been thinking about it for a long time and his mind was already made up. During the divorce, we lived together and it was just like we were still happily married. We even made love a number of times. Well, that's not recommended because I'm sure your lawyers probably discouraged you from doing that. But hey, since you're poly, what makes the difference? She says, during the process, I also maintained my relationship with my partner right up to the divorce. So even though she was trying to retain her husband here and hold on to the marriage, she didn't give up that partner. Interesting. She says, once the divorce was final, I parted ways with my poly partner due to the agreement he had with his wife to not date unattached women. Several months after our divorce, my husband met someone and they've been in a mono relationship ever since. So you see that once he got into the marriage, I think this guy thought, well, my wife and I will just naturally break away from this poly lifestyle, but she didn't. And I'm sure she was the one that pushed him back into it. I'm just sensing that. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I take from this story. He seems very happy and I think they will get married as they both want to have kids. I've not dated much since our divorce and have thrown myself into my work now. I'm looking for a professional guy who supports my lifestyle and is interested in having a long-term relationship and possibly starting a family one day. Do you think that's a good idea to bring kids into the world when you're living this kind of lifestyle? I think you need to kind of rethink that. And, once you're ready to settle down and have a family, you need to be monogamous, not this poly business. She finishes up and says, if you know of any great guys like this in the tri-state area, please send them my way. And I think she's up in the New York City metro area. And that's the end of her story. Now, I think all of you who've been following my channel for a long time know my thoughts on open relationships and polyamory. And I just have one takeaway from this. And I think you know what it's going to be. One moral of the story. And that is, never get into a polyamorous or open relationship as the failure rate is extremely high. I've read different articles. I think one said it was like 92%. Another one said like 90%. So getting into an arrangement like this, you can almost guarantee it's eventually going to fail. If you want to have casual relationships with multiple people and that's your business, then just stay single. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to get your opinion on this story and about open relationships and polyamory. What are your thoughts on all this business? Is this something you would ever consider? Have you ever done it before? Tell us about it in the comments. Also be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on the next one.